Your father, he lived in sheltered housing complex, didn't he? So the 5th of November last year, he obviously felt that something was wrong and he pulled this emergency cord.
That's right.
And this is a cord that once he press it, it goes through to 24/7 emergency hotline where people are on the other end of the phone to help.
Yeah.
And if needs be, ring 999 and get the appropriate care there.
That's correct, yes.
So he's pulled this. What happened?
It went through to the call centre, who only heard him shouting help. And so first, their duty of call is to phone either myself or Rita, next of kin. No answer from us, so then they phoned the ambulance straight after, so that's what they did.
And did they speak to him and ask him how he was feeling?
No, all he could do was, all he said was they could hear him shouting help.
Did he have contact with them? Was it a phone line, a two-way communication?
Monitor, like a monitor on the wall. There's no camera. It's just like a walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
And they shouted, you know, what's wrong? And my dad was shouting for help. He was heard shouting for help and moaning. So they told the ambulance, there's a guy come through. He's calling and shouting out for help. And the ambulance asked if he was awake. And then they asked if he was conscious. And then they asked if he's breathing. And then that was it. They were the most questions they asked.
But they couldn't elicit any response from your father
Nothing.
at all? So they couldn't get answers to those questions?
No, my dad never spoke to the ambulance at all.
Because he couldn't?
No, nobody spoke to my dad. Nobody. My dad pulled the cord asking for help. And the response phoned 999 and they spoke to the 999. Then after they'd handed over to the emergency services, they then switched the monitor off. They said to allow the ambulance to gain entry. So nobody spoke for my dad for 2 hours.
Now, there's different levels of response that an ambulance will provide, and he was given a low priority response, which meant that he was sat waiting. Nobody really knows what happens. He was on the floor for 100 minutes, and by the time the ambulance turned up, your father had sadly passed away.
Yes.
He had an underlying history of a heart condition, didn't he? And this was something that the ambulance weren't aware of.
No.
Yeah, the call centre actually have this on the monitor.
On the screen in front of him.
Did the call centre tell the ambulance service that he had a history of heart problems?
No, never told them.
But in their triage, the ambulance didn't ask.
No.
They didn't ask anything to do with the emergency, except is he conscious, is he breathing?
Do you believe had the right questions have been asked or responded to in the right way that things would have worked out very differently?
Yes, we were told that there were ambulances available with an 8-minute response had they had any more information. And when I asked, well, why didn't you ask for more information? They said they follow a protocol and they're the questions they ask.
Well, the coroner said it wasn't known when he wrote the note, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and it's heartbreaking. He said that obviously he recorded a verdict of natural causes, and that when he died, he didn't know whether or not he could have been saved had he had that red priority. Urged Magenta, who are the call centre company, to improve staff training so that call handlers share relevant medical history with the ambulance service in future. The coroner said there is a risk that future deaths will occur unless action is taken. The training manual and method of training call handlers needs to be revisited in light of the experience from Mr. Volante's tragic death. And the tragic thing, and this is what made the newspapers, is the fact that as he was lying there, quite obviously now we know dying, that he had enough time to just quickly write on the back of an envelope a note, and that's what he wrote on the back of that
that must be
envelope.
incredibly hard.
Absolutely heartbreaking for you guys to see that.
But nobody informed us our father had passed away either. It was my constant ringing of Dad's mobile phone to see what had happened, and a policeman answered.
There's nothing that you can do that's going to bring your dad back or change the experience that you had, but what you are doing is trying to make changes for the future to try and stop things like this happening. You've started a petition. What would you like to see happen?
Well, we'd like to see them trained properly, actually, to know what to say to the ambulance, tell them the medical history, tell them that they're actually on their own, they're not actually with anybody, they are in a flat by themselves and there's nobody there. So they need the response to get there.
Well, the two statements that came in to us from Magenta Care, who were the call centre, said we can confirm our staff acted in accordance with our call handling procedures, which were reviewed by the national body in November and were accredited against the national standard. However, we will implement the coroner's recommendations, which is a good thing, in cases where ambulances have been called. From the North West Ambulance Service, it says, as identified during the inquest, the NWAS, which is the North West Ambulance Service, emergency medical dispatcher, was not informed of crucial information concerning Mr. Volante's condition during the call, although, as we know, they didn't ask. If this had been provided, the call would have been treated with an urgent red priority, which would have triggered an 8-minute response from an ambulance crew. So this is a breakdown in communications when you look at this story from an outside point of view, isn't it? People just didn't pass on information.
Because if you phone an ambulance, you give too much information. But they didn't give any information at all to the ambulance service. And then again, the ambulance service didn't ask any relevant questions to the emergency. They just kept saying, is he breathing? Well, he was shouting for help, so we know he was breathing. Is he conscious? He was shouting and moaning. We know he was conscious. At the end of the call, the coroner actually picked up, why didn't you phone back to the ambulance? He said, well, we didn't get a response from Mr. Volante, so we hung up.
Wow.
And that's when they turned everything off. And the coroner said, there was a change in circumstances. Why didn't you phone back? And they said, well, we've already handed over.
It's very worrying, isn't it, if anybody's got friends or family who are being monitored by these systems that you put in place.
We've had a lot of people checking out now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where does their duty of care end? Was when they phoned 999. Their responsibility ended. And then 999 took it on.